Three things happened in the last 72 hours. Separately, each is significant. Together, they represent a shift that military analysts in Washington, Tehran, and Jerusalem are still processing. First, Israel's streets erupted. Not in celebration, not in fear, in anger. 18 arrests across 3 cities as thousands demanded the war end, now. Second, Iran launched its largest single strike of this conflict. Operation True Promise 3. We're still counting the missiles. Third, a ceasefire was announced for Gaza. Not because anyone won, because everyone is reaching their limit. I'm Riker Dean. Let's get into it. Let me paint you the picture from this morning in Tel Aviv. It's Saturday, March 28th. While most of the world was sleeping, Habima Square filled with thousands of Israelis carrying signs that read, "Enough and stop the war. Bring them home now." Police moved in, made arrests in Tel Aviv, Haifa, Jerusalem, 18 people detained. This isn't the first protest of this war, but it's different. Here's why. Previous demonstrations focused on the hostages, on the humanitarian crisis, on specific government policies. This one is about the war itself, the continuation, the cost. And the cost is no longer abstract. Let me give you the numbers that matter. Since the US and Israel opened this phase with a strike that killed Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, Israel has been under continuous bombardment, not sporadic, not symbolic, sustained. Iran has fired ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, drones. The Iron Dome, David's Sling arrow systems have intercepted hundreds. But here's what intercepting doesn't show you. The economic hemorrhage. Every Arrow 3 interceptor costs $3.5 million. Every ballistic missile Iran fires costs them perhaps $1 million. The exchange ratio favors the attacker, and Iran has thousands. But the real cost? It's in what you can't intercept, the uncertainty, the sleep deprivation, the businesses that can't operate because employees are in shelters, the tourism that evaporated overnight, the investment that fled. This morning, Israel's Central Bureau of Statistics released preliminary data showing consumer confidence at its lowest point since the 1973 Yom Kippur War. That's not a headline. That's an economy screaming. Now, let's talk about what Iran did last night. Iran launched a coordinated package, ballistic missiles for hardened targets, cruise missiles for infrastructure, drones for saturation and deception. The target set included military bases, airfields, and, significantly, economic nodes. But here's what separates this strike from previous ones: timing. Iran waited until Israel's interceptor stockpiles were depleted from 80-plus previous waves. They waited until the U.S. had committed over 230 interceptors in earlier phases and was scrambling to resupply. They waited until the psychological toll of sustained alert had degraded Israeli civilian resilience. This isn't random. This is systematic. And there's a message embedded in this timing. Iran is telling Israel, we know your cycles, we know your shortages, we know when you're vulnerable. The strike also carried a direct threat to America. Iranian state media announced that U.S. bases in the Middle East would be targeted if America intervened further. That's not posturing. That's a red line being drawn in real time. Now, I need you to understand something that doesn't make the viral clips but determines everything else. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. Has been since March 21st. And if you don't understand what that means, you don't understand this war. 20% of global oil shipments pass through that waterway. 20%. When it closes, prices don't just rise, they explode. We're at 110 per barrel as of this morning. Pre-war, 70%. Let me translate that. Every dollar increase cost the global economy billions. At 110, we're looking at a projected 2.9 percentage point drop in global GDP growth this quarter, according to Federal Reserve modeling. For Israel, this is existential economics. They're a trading nation. Everything they import, food, technology, medicine, costs more. Everything they export faces higher shipping costs. Their currency is under pressure. Their reserves are depleting. For Europe, winter isn't over. Gas storage levels that look comfortable in February look terrifying in March when Russian supplies are uncertain and LNG can't get through. For America, gas prices at the pump are climbing toward 5 per gallon in some states. Inflation, which the Fed thought it had controlled, is resurging. And all of this is happening in a midterm election year. Iran knows this. The Hormuz closure isn't military strategy, it's economic warfare, and it's working. So what happens in the next 72 hours? Let me give you 3 scenarios based on current trajectory. Scenario 1, the ceasefire holds. The Gaza ceasefire announced yesterday, 10 days, brokered through Egyptian channels, expands. Iran, having made its point with Operation True Promise 3, accepts a pause. Israel, facing domestic pressure and interceptor depletion, agrees to negotiate. Probability? 30%. Why so low? Because neither side has achieved their stated objectives. Because neither side hasn't driven America out. Israel hasn't destroyed Iran's missile forward to look weak with protests growing. Scenario 2, escalation. Iran targets US bases directly, as threatened. American casualties trigger automatic escalation clauses in defense treaties. We see strikes on Iranian command centers, possibly nuclear facilities. Probability, 40%. This is the momentum scenario. The logic of war, action, reaction, counter-reaction takes over. And once you start targeting leadership directly, as Israel did with Khamenei, the escalatory ceiling disappears. Scenario 3, the unraveling. Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, break with American strategy and pursue independent negotiations with Tehran. They can't afford the economic damage. They can't risk Iranian missiles hitting their desalination plants, their financial districts, their airports. Probability? 30%, but rising daily. Dubai International has already been hit. Tourism in the Gulf has collapsed. These countries didn't want this war. They're being dragged into it. But here's what I think is actually happening. Behind the scenes, in back channels we won't know about for years. Iran is offering the Gulf states a deal. Guarantee our security, expel American bases, and we reopen Hormuz. Guarantee our regime survival, and we stop the missiles. Whether that deal is being considered, whether it's being rejected, I don't know. But the incentive structure is undeniable. Now let's talk about Washington. Because everything I've described creates a single question for the Trump administration. How do we exit without losing? The initial calculation, decapitate Iranian leadership, destroy nuclear infrastructure, watch the regime collapse, has failed. Khamenei is dead. The regime isn't collapsing. It's retaliating with precision and patience. Trump faces a classic strategic dilemma. De-escalation looks like admission of failure. Continuation risks deeper entanglement with no exit strategy. But there's a clock ticking. Domestic political clock, economic clock, military logistics clock. The U.S. has expended enormous resources in 30 days of operations. Over 230 interceptors fired, multiple aircraft carriers deployed, B-2 bombers flying 36-hour round trips from Missouri. And for what? Iran's missile capability is degraded but operational. Its leadership is wounded but functioning. Its will to fight is, if anything, stronger. Here's the uncomfortable truth that analysts in D.C. are whispering. This war is militarily unwinnable at acceptable cost. You can destroy every facility Iran has. You can't destroy the knowledge of how to build them. You can't destroy the grievance that drives recruitment. You can't destroy the geographic reality that makes Hormuz a choke point. What can you achieve through other means? Let's go back to those protests in Tel Aviv. Because they matter more than any missile strike. Israel is a small country. Geographically, economically, demographically, it cannot sustain indefinite war. It especially cannot sustain war that looks strategically inconclusive. Netanyahu promised decisive victory. He promised that eliminating Khamenei would collapse Iran's capacity to fight. He promised that American support would be unlimited. None of these promises have been fully kept. The result is a legitimacy crisis. When citizens who have accepted decades of security burden start saying enough, when reservists start questioning deployment orders, when the economic pain becomes personal, the political foundation cracks, and there's something else, something darker. The protest signs say, bring them home now. They're talking about hostages, but they're also talking about something else. They're talking about a vision of Israel that isn't permanent war, that isn't endless alert, that isn't the slow transformation of a society into a fortress. That vision is under threat, not from Iran, from the logic of this war itself. So here's where we stand. 72 hours from now, which scenario is unfolding? If the ceasefire expands, if back-channel talks accelerate, if the Gulf states step forward as mediators, we're looking at a managed de-escalation. Messy, incomplete, but survivable. If Iran strikes American bases, if Israel launches major new operations, if the Hormuz closure extends into April, we're looking at regional transformation. The kind that redraws alliances, collapses economies, and creates instability that lasts decades. The variables are moving fast, faster than policy can adapt, faster than publics can be informed, faster than markets can price risk. You need to watch 3 things, not the missile videos, not the explosion footage. 3 data points that actually matter. 1, Israeli domestic politics. If Netanyahu falls, everything changes. 2, Gulf state diplomacy. If they break with Washington, the American position becomes untenable. 3, American military posture. If you see B-2s returning to Guam, if you see carrier groups withdrawing, you're watching preparation for exit. Everything else is noise, distraction, theater. The next 72 hours will determine whether this war has limits, or whether we've crossed into territory where limits no longer apply. I'm Riker Dean. Stay informed, stay critical, and watch the pressure points, not the explosions.